My colleague Peter Atkins, whose works I recommend to you, I think that it's high time that a scientist won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and Peter Atkins would be my nominee for that. He was once invited to give a lecture in Windsor Castle, which, as you know, is one of the homes of the British monarch. And at the end of his lecture, Prince Philip said, "You scientists are awfully good at answering the how questions, but what about the why question?" And Peter Atkins said, "Sir, the why question is just a silly question."
I think the most reprehensible position represented in tonight's debate is Richard Dawkins' claim that why questions are just silly. These are the deepest existential questions that human beings can ask, and refuse to ask such why questions is to reduce human beings to mere animals, which is, of course, exactly what Professor Dawkins believes. We're just animated chunks of matter in motion. Love, questions of meaning, and so forth are all ultimately just spin-offs of the blind bioevolutionary process. But if God exists, then clearly these are meaningful questions. These are vital questions for the nature of human existence and destiny. The tragedy would be that if God does exist and you miss his purpose for your life because you think these are silly questions and therefore don't need to think about them, would be the ultimate tragedy.
Mr. Craig was critical of me for refusing to answer the why question because I said it's a silly question. The mere fact that you can ask a question in the English language doesn't make it a question that deserves an answer. I could say, what is the color of jealousy? It's not a sensible question. It's a silly question. And the same goes for the question of why is the universe the way it is.
What is Dawkins' ultimate problem with why questions? Why do you think his mindset is so firmly located in only the things that science can tell us have any worth in terms of knowing?
It must be, again, the presupposition of this epistemology or theory of knowledge of scientism, that unless a question has a scientific answer, that is to say, an answer that is available through the deliverances of the natural sciences, the five senses, that then the question is meaningless and therefore silly to ask. What this is, Justin, I think, is a lingering hangover of the verificationism and positivism that dominated philosophy back in the 1930s and 40s. It has been universally given up among philosophers and theorists of knowledge. It's been recognized that this old verificationism is self-defeating and far too restrictive to be a plausible criterion of meaning. And yet among people like Dawkins and others who were educated, I think, in the positivist era, this sort of scientistic approach to knowledge still hangs on in their work and lingers, and as a result still has not been exorcised from popular culture.
I think that it's high time that a scientist won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and Peter Atkins would be my nominee for that.
Nothing did indeed come from nothing. Science shows that the universe is in fact a big confidence trick. There is truly nothing here.
Did you catch how radical his view is? Because he doesn't really believe the universe exists. On Dr. Atkins' view, nothing exists. I at least exist. As Descartes said, even when I doubt that I exist, who is there to do the doubting? I doubt, therefore I am.
You cannot argue for some truth about the universe by saying that it would be nice if it were true.
We've argued tonight, first of all, that if God does not exist, then the universe has no purpose. Our atheist colleagues admit that. But now what they've been claiming is, but look, we can construct a purpose for our lives, in Richard Dawkins' words. Or in Michael Shermer's words, we can develop ways to make us feel better, feeling like we have a purpose. Now, you see, this just is to say that we can pretend that the universe exists for some purpose. And this is just make-believe. This is the subjective illusion of purpose. But there is, on this view, no objective purpose for the universe. And we, of course, would never deny that you can't develop subjective purposes for your life. The point is, on atheism, they're all illusory. And that's why I agree with Richard Dawkins when he said, at bottom, this is an emotional question rather than a rational one. I wish I had had the courage to say that. I'm convinced that people adopt atheism, at least tonight, primarily for emotional rather than rational purposes. The rational arguments tonight all have supported theism. But you cannot live as though your life were purposeless and meaningless. And therefore you adopt subjective illusions of purpose to make your life livable. And that's why I think atheism is not only irrational, it is profoundly unlivable. You cannot live consistently and purposefully within the context of an atheistic worldview.